Coming up on IGI, the 2026 Kansas legislative session is underway, and our panel of experts is here to break down all the possibilities. Stay with us.
This program on KTWU is brought to you by the Carol Jory Foundation.
Hello and welcome to IGI. I'm your host, Bob Beatty. One thing I've learned over the years is that Kansas politics is never dull. But 2025, well, that's a year for the record books. Amazingly, Democrats and Republicans working together pulled off a deal that rocked the state in late December.
We are excited about this regional partnership and committed to delivering real results that benefit Kansas, strengthen our region, and uplift our local community. With that said, Chiefs, Clark Hunt family, welcome to Kansas!
So we'll be talking about the monster news that the Kansas City Chiefs are building a domed stadium in little old Kansas with our all-star panel of experts. But time stops for no one. It's now 2026. The governor has given her 8th and last State of the State speech. The legislature is back in session. And oh, it's an election year, and candidates for governor are thick on the ground. So as always, it's going to be busy, never dull in Kansas. With possible mid-decade redistricting still alive, banning cell phones in classrooms, higher education budget cuts, more anti-DEI legislation, there's lots of things to talk about. Fortunately, we do have an all-star panel of Kansas politics experts to make sense of it all, or at least we hope so. From the Kansas Reflector, senior reporter Tim Carpenter. From KSNT in Topeka is reporter and anchor Rebecca Chung, and from Emporia State University is Professor Michael Smith. Well, we are fortunate to have such a great panel, but before we get started on all these fascinating topics, I wanted to congratulate Tim Carpenter for being named to the Kansas Press Association Hall of Fame. Tim, you're the only Hall of Famer in the all-star panel, so I can legitimately say it's a Hall of Fame panel.
It is. It's a great bit of notoriety. I love it.
And how long have you been in the business? When did you? How many years since you first filed your first story?
As a professional journalist, this is my 39th year in Kansas, being a reporter.
All right. Well, I'm being nice to you because you may not like the
Later on, you're going to be cruel?
Yeah, I'm going to be cruel, yeah.
Okay.
Obviously, the Kansas City Chiefs are coming to Kansas, and we do have a segment here on IGI now called Burn the Tape. And earlier in May, I predicted, well, you can see it for yourself. Let's roll the clip. And so the take that I want to make is that the Kansas City Chiefs are going to come to Kansas. Full stop. And here's why. The Chiefs have indicated that they want a stadium where they can have Super Bowls, where they want to make money, you know, and they want to be competitive with other stadiums across the NFL. Well, how much is that going to cost? Well, the Washington Commanders have announced they're going to build a $3.7 billion stadium, and Washington, D.C. is going to chip in $1 billion. Okay, well, what about... Let's think about Missouri. You'd say, well, Bob, they're going to stay in Missouri. Look at Missouri's track record. Kansas City A's go to Oakland, the baseball team. The St. Louis Cardinals football team off to Arizona. The Kansas City Kings, NBA. Oh, nobody likes the NBA. They're off to Sacramento. St. Louis Rams football off to LA. Missouri has one of the worst records of keeping pro teams, you know, in America. So they got that going for them. Okay, so where are the Chiefs going to get this money, right? Is it going to be from Missouri, where their own legislators are saying their discussions about this are, quote, dysfunctional? Clay County? People are saying Clay County will have to have a vote to decide that. You think the Chiefs want to vote over stadium financing. The governor of Missouri said, quote, not in favor of just throwing money at stadiums. Well, guess who is in favor of throwing money at stadiums? Kansas. They're going to do it.
Are you saying you think one of these franchises is coming to Kansas?
Yeah, the Kansas City Chiefs.
What you really need to think about is the Royals going downtown like they wanted in the first place, and the Chiefs are going to stay precisely where they are right now.
And you're going to get a Super Bowl in Arrowhead Stadium.
They could build a new stadium in the parking lot right there for a couple $2 billion.
Yeah, we're throwing the flag on you, Bob. I think that is a 10 yards, 15 yards. You're wrong.
Wrong? Well, we call this burn the tape because if I was wrong, I probably wouldn't be showing it. But
so you can take my Hall of Fame citation back because I was wrong about that.
No, that's the fun of it. You know, months and months ago, things were going on. So you didn't. We'll start with Tim. At the time, you did not think the Chiefs were coming. So, what was it? Some of the things I said. What do you think was the key ingredient?
I think the key was that Kansas offered the Chiefs too much money, and they just couldn't possibly say no.
Rebecca, I'm not going to show it, but later on, you vehemently tell me I'm wrong as well. But yeah, we won't show that clip. But what do you think? Because you didn't think they were coming as well. So what do you think?
Well, Bob, I'm glad you burned that tape.
Yeah, I burned that piece. Or at least it's in a computer somewhere.
You know, in my head, though, I will say I was a bit on the fence about it, just because it was so much money, and I don't know what the long-term risk could be, right? However, I do think because of how much Kansas threw at this team, they did see it as the better deal compared to Missouri. So in the back of my head, you know, I think I was trying to play devil's advocate here.
Yeah, and I think at one point, you know, some point months ago, when I read the Chiefs really wanted a dome, that's why I mentioned that, they're so expensive. And once that idea came that they want a dome, that's where it was going to be now into the $4 billion.
I think the core to what we were saying is it's just so easy to disagree with you, Bob. That we just felt compelled to say no.
Now, Michael, you wanted to. You were telling me earlier you wanted to say something about maybe the Royals, because technically they're still looking for a new stadium, right?
Deal's still on the table. I'll predict that they're not going to the Hesperia campus, formerly the Sprint campus. There's too much neighborhood resistance. So I think the Royals are still up in the air. I mean, Tim could still turn out to be right that they might go to downtown Kansas City.
Okay, we'll keep that tape for now.
Okay.
Yeah, obviously there's a lot more to say about that. A lot of money involved, and also just a lot going on with that. Probably we'll have a special on the big move down the line. But we have a lot to talk about. The governor's State of the State, she gave that. And by the way, in that State of the State, she mentioned the Chiefs 7 times. So there's a lot of other topics. But one thing I wanted to sort of quickly get into is when I was at the State of the State and I looked up in the gallery, I saw several gubernatorial candidates in the gallery watching, and then I looked at the legislature and saw a couple more. Will the governor's race with all these candidates impact this session? Maybe yes or no. I don't know if it will. You know, what do you think, Rebecca? Can it?
Well, the governor's race impact the session.
Impact this session. What might get passed, or even the dynamics?
For sure. I definitely think so. It'll impact what policies get passed, what comes up. I think something I wanted to note about the governor's State of the State address, and what I was hearing from several lawmakers on both sides after the governor's speech, is what happened to property taxes. The governor...
She didn't mention it, right?
Right. She didn't mention it much. And the governor boasted a lot of bipartisan wins that the state could accomplish or has accomplished. But property tax relief seems to be something that's important for both sides, and it wasn't mentioned to the degree that a lot of people wanted it to be. That was something that Republicans were saying, but even some Democrats were concerned about why that would have not come up. So we'll have to see if that, some plan comes together toward the end, because it is a big issue for voters as well.
And the problem with that, Rebecca, is with property taxes, the issue is assessments. It's not levies. And then we're talking about taking away from the counties the ability to set their own assessments. And it gets really messy really quickly. They also fund schools.
So one of the candidates for governor, the Republican nomination, is the Senate President Ty Masterson of the Wichita area. And on the top of his priority list for the 26th session is a constitutional amendment on property taxes. So even if Laura Kelly forgot about it, the Republicans didn't.
To Michael's point, it is very complicated because it impacts the state and local, the cities and the counties, and there is now even a new caucus in the legislature, the state and local caucus, made up of legislators who are wanting to represent. And I kind of wonder if that's because of this property tax issue. So they can say, hey, yes, you can pass this, but what's it going to do to cities and counties where all the property tax is? So in terms of the governor's race, I guess I'm sort of asking, are there any, okay, yes, you mentioned Ty Masterson. So that would be an issue he would love to see passed, because then he's running for governor. That's what you're sort of alluding to, right? And go on the campaign trail.
Structurally, in terms of the session, the governor's race and at least there's 3 candidates for governor. Well, there's 7 candidates for statewide office in the legislature, and 3 of them are running for governor. I think they want to speed up this session, get out maybe late March, so they can get out the campaign trail, raise money, and get at it.
Right, and pass something they can campaign on. Yeah.
Keep it simple and pass 2 or 3 things that they can claim victory for.
Right.
So is that an advantage? I mean, there's some candidates that aren't in the legislature. Vicki Schmidt, obviously, insurance commissioner, Jeff Collier, former governor, they're not in the legislature. I have a feeling that, Masterson spoke when the Chiefs announced they were coming, and he's a jovial guy, but he had a big grin on his face. So that also may be something he could talk about when he's running. So it is quite an advantage, maybe, this session to be in the legislature.
Well, and keep in mind that our politics today are very primary driven. In Kansas, that's particularly on the Republican side. So look for the Republicans to move right and to try to throw some red meat to their constituents. They're not going to move to the center. The Democrats might, but they're in the minority.
But maybe not you're right, but maybe not necessarily even want them to pass and go into a special session, going overriding vetoes and say, I introduced this, but...
Exactly, Bob. Lots of signaling. It doesn't mean this legislature is going to pass.
The red meat, I like that. In the House, one of the first things they did in the first week of the session was to try to pass a measure that said the World Health Organization has no standing in Kansas. So that doesn't really have much practical application. It's just a headline grabber that somebody can throw out there.
Yeah. So, between May and that clip you saw when I had the beard, and now, the drama for all of us, for watching Kansas politics, was an attempt to redistrict in Kansas, mid-decade redistricting. Donald Trump called for it, and then Texas, and now in Democratic states, California, they all got in the act. And little old Kansas, with its 4 seats, was targeted as well, and it didn't happen. There was many legislative leaders on the Republican side that wanted a special session just to do that. Okay, so there's now talk about it possibly happening in this legislative session. Will it happen? Or what are the dynamics for it possibly to happen? And it's a pretty big deal because there is one Democratic Congresswoman, Sharice Davids, who wants to start on that one.
No way they have the votes to override the veto. So it would be strictly signaling. It would also tear apart the Republican caucus in Johnson County because Johnson County business leaders are against it.
Yeah, I would agree. Right now, it's looking unlikely. They don't have the votes on the House side. The pros of this would be that if they did go ahead and draw those new maps, they could lock in a GOP lean in a district that's currently held by Sharice Davids, who they've been trying to oust from Congress for years. The cons, though, to Michael's point, is perhaps upsetting some voters in Johnson County, and and that would be a lot of voters, especially if you're running for governor. Right?
Yeah, even introducing it keeps, I mean, I'm on everybody's email list, and one is Sharice Davids, and she's using this issue to raise a lot of money.
Could I make a point,
Yeah.
too? I don't know how many of the viewers know this. Did you know Johnson County had a blue shift between 2020 and 2024? Kamala Harris got a higher percentage of votes than Joe Biden in Johnson County. Now, that's mostly because of a turnout drop, but that's pretty remarkable. It looks like Johnson County being blue is here to stay.
Which of the incumbent Republicans, we have 3 in the U.S. House, and then there's Sharice Davids, the only Democrat, only woman, only minority. If you jigger those districts around so some Republican has to step in, who wants to take on a busload of angry Johnson County voters? Centrist and Democrats. You know, who wants that? If I'm an incumbent Republican in Congress, I don't want that on my deck, you know? So,
That's right.
So that's going to be part of the question. Where's the candidate going to come from that can beat Sharice Davids? You know, they gerrymandered her district before, cut half of Wyandotte County out of her district, and she still won by double digits. She is a formidable candidate.
I've argued it currently, she's the most formidable candidate of all politicians in Kansas, just because of some of the things you're saying. She's so unique, and she's combative when she wants to be.
Amusingly, she suggested that if, because U.S. Senator Roger Marshall is up for re-election this year, she kind of threw down that if they X'd her out of her congressional House seat, that she just might run for the U.S. Senate, which is just not the kind of thing that Roger Marshall wants to hear.
But do you think it was amusing, or do you think she means it and she would run for another office, whether Senate or something? She's still pretty young.
I try not to crawl into the head of politicians, so who knows? But it was just an interesting line that you could include in your story, and it got Marshall's attention.
Well, I'll stick my neck out there. I think if she's gerrymandered out, she will run for another office.
Oh, wow, okay. Wow, I mean, that would be wild. I mean,
Did you get that on tape?
Yeah, this is all being taped.
We're taping right now,
Thank
Tim.
you, Michael. We're going to move on, although that could be a whole other show. The governor, interstate of the state, Tim's, again, we're both older, Tim, so I'm not going to make any age aspersions, but we've been around to many state of the states. I can't remember the last one where a policy issue from Governor Kelly, maybe even Sebelius, got a standing ovation from the Republicans. But Kelly got one with her cell phone ban comment. So maybe you can remember one, but I thought, wow, this is rare. So it looks like that's probably going to pass.
So there's bipartisan support for the idea of banning cell phones for kids during school hours. And I think there's already a bill introduced. This is something that's been tried elsewhere. And
Australia.
For some reason,
that's
it's caught
social media.
fire in Kansas. And I think the governor talked about it perhaps helping students with their mental health. But the House Speaker, Dan Hawkins, spoke about it in terms of trying to improve students' test scores, essentially, improving academic performance. And I'm kind of curious what kind of facts they have behind those two notions. Of course, cell phones are an impediment if they're dangling around students' necks when they should be studying at school. But there's a lot, you know, people are really tethered to them. I'm not sure what the response is going to be. You could have like fourth graders marching through the school with protest signs.
But guess what? They don't vote. They don't vote. And that's not who
There
they're
could be a
appealing to.
walkout. The kindergartners just walked out.
Well, and there's the whole helicopter parents issue, too. Parents want to contact their kids 24/7.
Exactly.
And they worry about an emergency. So that's going to be a factor.
Yeah, I think there will be exceptions to this for medical issues and things like that students will still have them under some circumstances. But just generally wandering around the halls with your face stuck in your phone and clicking away, that's what they want to get rid of.
Yep.
I think it also calls into question, how is this going to be enforced, and what are the consequences if someone decides to have their cell phone in class, right? I think some local school districts could also think, maybe we don't want a blanket mandate, and maybe we want to do our own thing.
Yeah, once again, the legislature, Kansas legislature doesn't like the federal government telling the Kansas legislature what to do. But once again, the Kansas legislature thinks they should tell duly elected local school board members what to do.
Which circles back to property taxes. Should they be micromanaging how the counties
I'm getting
assess
dizzy here.
property?
They certainly want to, yeah.
They certainly want to,
Yeah.
but the counties don't.
No,
Well-
cities and counties, schools, right.
I read something, but I'll take credit for myself. Why did we ever think it was a good idea for students of any age to have cell phones in a classroom? Ever?
Maybe because they can use laptops in classrooms. Are we going to ban laptops in
Yes,
classrooms?
sure.
Oh.
Bob, you really are showing your age.
No.
Doesn't mean it's wrong. But in a semi-serious vein, a lot of it came with parents worried about the kids.
Right.
And a lot of it actually has to do with the trip to and from school, not actually being in school, which leaves the door open, right? Because you could say no phones in school, but you can bring it, put it in the little pocket thing, and then you can have it with you going home. So that might be a compromise with the parents.
This sounds like a whole show because this is fascinating. It's like, how did we make it without cell phones? How, right? We're here, right?
Pen and paper.
But we're the last few, right? How did we get to school?
Well, Bob, it weighs you down when you're walking to school in the snow uphill both ways several miles to have that cell phone.
This sounds
you
like
know.
a whole show. It's really interesting. Okay, I wanted another topic is that maybe Tim could tell us because I think there might have already been a hearing on it. Is DEI. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? There was a bill passed last year, but apparently it's not enough because some other states passed DEI bills, I think Texas, where they're going in and looking at people's professors' syllabi. So going into the classroom, whereas Kansas is, if you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think was mostly about practices of hiring and things.
They did look at syllabi.
I've heard that some legislators want more anti-DEI bills. So are we going to see that happen?
There is a bill.
Okay.
Bill 2428, the Freedom from Indoctrination Act. It's based on model legislation from the Goldwater Institute. Would prohibit it's a variety of different terms like whiteness, white privilege, all kinds of things like that could not be a part of any course that's a required part of any program. Talk about signaling.
And that's a bill.
It's been filed.
Okay.
It's been
I think the
filed, yeah.
intent is to make sure that the politicians are micromanaging the colleges and universities to the extent that they're telling people what kind of curriculum to offer. And apparently, maybe there were legislators that assumed they had already waded into that realm, but this time they're going to make sure.
And it's an election year. But also, kind of behind the scenes, there's a lot of bad blood between the Board of Regents and the legislature right now. They are fighting. And I think that's part of what this is the legislature keeps signaling to the Board of Regents what they want them to do. But the Board of Regents is not appointed by the legislature. And so behind the scenes, there's a lot of tension there. I have a feeling KBOR is not happy about this bill.
Yeah, this would definitely give them some leverage, I think, in higher ed budget negotiations when it's like, comply or you can get your funding cut. I think on the other hand, to Michael's point, it plays strongly with the conservative base during an election year when you're saying we want to keep classrooms neutral and we want to get rid of quote unquote taxpayer funded ideology. On the other hand, could this impact recruiting for teachers and students outside of the state?
Oh yeah, and we'll see, but the trend seems now to be wavering, especially I think because of what's going on in Texas, which is pretty wild.
It is pretty wild.
Which is looking over syllabi and telling professors, the biggest example is the philosophy professor who can't teach
You
some
guys
sections.
are faculty. Don't you think there's a gap between the syllabus and what you actually say to students during a 3-month period?
Well, there's a gap, but in the syllabus it might have an article, about, in this example, by Plato, or a reading by Plato, where in Texas they said, no, you can't have that reading.
What would be
traditionally
wrong with an
conservatives love
article
Plato.
about DEI that, say, praises it so a student can better understand the arguments why that kind of information would be
Well,
poisonous?
that's the debate that's going on.
How do you teach one way or the other without people reading and learning about both sides of
And
the
if you think
question?
about the scholar Alan Bloom from the 80s, who the Reagan and Bush administration loved, he was a Plato scholar. So this is a major, major shift. Also, Bob, to your point, you teach at Washburn, which is not a KBOR school. They did call in our syllabi. And they gave us about 1 week to submit them. So that actually has happened in Kansas. And they've already gigged English textbook being used at K-State.
All right, I didn't know that. So maybe another show we have to do here. Let's do very quickly, just one prediction. We won't get into big arguments for the upcoming session. We can't get into big argument, but Tim, you have a prediction for this upcoming?
For the session, let's just say something about the governor's race. I think in the Republican primary, very crowded. I think the contenders are really former Governor Jeff Collier, the Senate President Ty Masterson, and Insurance Commissioner Vicki Schmidt. And I will predict that Vicki Schmidt outperforms expectations.
Okay, that's an interesting one, and I might circle back to that. Rebecca?
I will say, despite the current lack of support for redrawing new maps, Republicans will still find a way to either get that support in some way or another to get new maps redrawn and passed, or close to it.
Really?
Yes.
That is a...
Burn the tape if I'm wrong.
I'm glad you're going out there. It's just fascinating to me because there's so many pros and cons to it. I just think the Johnson County aspect, but you're right, they may stretch ahead. Michael?
I think the cell phone ban will pass. I think a water bill may pass. Other than that, I think it's going to be an extremely unproductive session.
Well, some would say if they don't pass much, it's a very productive.
It depends on your perspective, doesn't it?
Session.
It won't produce a lot. Whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing is a whole separate debate.
Yeah, we only have a little bit of time. So
you keep saying things like that, and the legislature is going to cut the higher ed budget.
They're already going to cut it, Tim. Don't you read the Reflector?
Occasionally.
So I'm going to ask Tim, our Hall of Famer. Is there any surprises we should look for? I think what Rebecca said kind of surprises me. I don't think it's bad you're going on a prediction and hard. That's great. But I think it'd be a surprise if they do it, but they very well might. Do you see any surprises?
So I should just keep track.
Yeah.
It was like the World Health Organization idea. I'm just going to keep track. Maybe there'll be a dozen bills like that that get on the House or Senate floor.
Yeah.
You just have to ask yourself, why are we doing this? Aren't there more important issues out there?
So we're going to be surprised at some of this.
Yeah. Just the
issues that come up.
I don't want to say it's
stupid,
but let's just say it's a waste of time.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me, and actually I've gotten ideas for future shows already, and we've got that governor's race. So we'll be back, I think, is my main point. So that's all the time we have for this episode of IGI. If you have any comments or suggestions for future topics, send us an email at issues@ktwu.org. If you would like to view this program again or any previous episodes of IGI, visit us online at watch.ktwu.org. For IGI, I'm Bob Beatty. I thank my guests and thank you all for watching.
This program on KTWU is brought to you by the Carol Jory Foundation.